Okay, well, welcome everyone. I'm sure we'll have some more people trickling in. I know what it's like on Zoom. Everybody's like, oh, and then 5 minutes later, they're like, oh, I forgot about that Zoom call. But all good. I'm just going to share my screen for a moment, tell you a little bit about today and what we'll be doing, and give you a brief overview of Conscious Capitalism Boston and what we do. If you've never heard of us before, welcome. And we'll go from there. All right. So can everyone see my slide? So I'm going to, instead of doing full screen, I'm going to leave it like this only because what ends up happening is it takes over my screen and I'm having an issue with it. So I'm just going to leave it like this and we'll walk through it. But I just want to welcome everyone to Cultivating Culture Through Creativity and the Science of Play at Work. We're super excited to have Alexander Suckman and David Razor. So who's going to talk to us a little bit about this. And just so that, I mean, right now we have a small group, so we could probably manage the chat and be able to you can feel free to ask questions in the chat and then we'll open it up for a Q&A at the end. Okay. So let me just tell you a little bit about who we are. So the Boston chapter has been here for quite a few years, and really what we're tied to Conscious Capitalism Inc., which is out of which is an international company, and we have chapters all over the world. And our purpose is really to connect, educate, and inspire leaders and workers to consciously build businesses that positively impact the world. Our vision is to foster the fundamental transformation of capitalism to a healthy, balanced way of doing business for all people and the planet. And I joined several years ago. I'd been following Conscious Capitalism Inc. and their work, and really aspired to this idea that we can bring humanity back to business. And that's truly what this is about. And as you can see, the world's evolved, so we need this more than ever. So that's pretty much a little bit about our chapter. And let me just, whoops. And some of our corporate members are listed here. So we have different levels of membership. And Bob Scoville, who isn't here today, but he kind of leads up our membership and helps to bring in businesses to have peer advisory and support that business model. Becca Collins is here from Collins Construction, and she is president of Collins Construction and is one of our corporate members. So we can shout out to Becca. That would be great. She's been a huge supporter and helper, and actually this year asked her to help support and advise us on the board because she brings a unique perspective, especially given the construction industry. All right. So what's our agenda today? Well, I'm going to do a brief introduction of the speakers, and then I'm going to turn it over to Alex, who's going to take us through a discussion and an interactive session on cultivating culture through creativity with the use of play at work. And then we'll have a Q&A, but feel free to put any questions in the chat and we'll try to answer them along the way as well. And that way we can really have you be more of a participant in this. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about our speakers. So first and foremost, Alexander Suckman, she is the CEO and co-founder of Barometer XP, a company that uses games and play to build stronger leaders and thriving workplace cultures. She's a woman on a mission to make work a place you actually want to be. And by facilitating game sessions for Barometer XP's clients, she helps individuals and teams build a sense of trust and community that leads to meaningful, sustainable culture change. Before co-founding Barometer XP, Alex founded the consulting firm AIS Collaborations, as well as working for over a decade in policy, public health, and operations management. She has an MPP from the George Washington University, a BA in psychology from Colby College, and is certified as both a project management professional and a DISC coach. She currently lives in Washington, D.C. with her partner and their dog, who thinks that play she's involved in should definitely include her. I get this as an animal lover. So that's a little bit about Alex. And then we have David Reiser. And David, he's Chief Operating Officer of Storm Bio. He's a seasoned biotech executive with experience in all aspects of startup formation, operations, and early stage company growth. He brings together biotech leadership expertise and a passion for turning transformative science into impactful solutions. As an active member of Boston's startup community, David is a sought-after speaker and panelist on entrepreneurship and innovation. Prior to joining Storm Bio, David was co-founder and CEO of Aldutu Biosciences, a biotech venture focused on commercializing a novel molecular detection technology for infectious disease diagnostics. Under David's leadership, Aldalto responded to the pandemic by pivoting their operations to deliver products for the SARS-CoV detection, and David earned his PhD in molecular biology from Harvard. So what we like to do here at Conscious Capitalism Boston is always pair a business that has benefited from some of these techniques. And so that you can have real world application, right? It's nice to have a lot of education and sort of theory, but then we bring it to life in businesses. So I welcome them both. And I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and open it up. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And as Lisa mentioned, this is going to be really interactive. We're actually going to do a couple of different games and activities and talk about them. And that'll be mixed in with me sharing how do you use play strategically for conscious leadership, for conscious culture, and for building really thriving companies. As she mentioned, my background was originally in public health and public policy. I did that for over a decade, but got very focused on how workplaces functioned and what type of working environment people needed to really thrive. I saw a lot of very smart and very motivated people at all stages of their career burn out because of whether it was lack of process, lack of infrastructure, not enough attention to culture and people, and felt like it shouldn't be that hard of a problem to solve to make work a more motivating, inclusive, engaging place at all levels, and pivoted my career to be in that space. And then about 5 years ago, was one of the co-founders of the company Barometer XP, that's specifically using play and bringing play into the training and development space. Just want to point out that May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and a big piece of everybody's mental health is how you are at work, whether you feel like you can show up as yourself, whether you feel like work can be compartmentalized to part of your identity and not take over everything, whether you feel like the people that you're spending all these hours in your day communicating with are people that are helping you and you feel like they have your back, or if you feel like they're obstacles that are getting in your way. So it's just an important framing to think about when you're thinking about leadership and culture is what's best for the well-being, mental and physical and emotional, for the people at the workplace. So my plan for today, we're going to explore this play-based approach to leadership and culture and to learning and development. We're going to get to do a couple of different activities throughout and reflect on them. And then I'm really excited that David is here from Storm Bio. It's a biotech firm in Boston that we've worked with a number of times at different stages of their journey to bring in play for creativity and for connection and for deep learning. So we'll hear about that experience as well. But I want to open with a game, get the energy up and get people thinking creatively. Have anybody ever played Poetry for Neanderthal? Excellent.
No.
It's very quick. It's very easy. It's a word guessing game. But the catch is that the person who's describing the word, which in this case will be me, I am limited to 1-syllable words for the clues that I can give. So I have to think very creatively and very concisely about how to describe this so that it will make sense to you. And initially we're just going to play it just for fun, but then we're going to reflect on how it might be used in a learning space. So just for the ease of communication and Zoom, it's also often hard to hear if people are all speaking at the same time. Let's put the guesses in the chat. So if you think you know what word I'm describing, type it into the chat. Any questions? Ready to start? Okay, and I'll just say the word that I'm describing doesn't have to be 1 syllable, the word that you're guessing, but I'm limited to 1-syllable words for the clue. Okay. Round, sand, throw, children, bright, sand. Yes, beach ball. Excellent. I'll do another one. Bake, small, wrapped, cupcakes. Oh my gosh, that was amazing. That was very quick. I'll do one more. Fruit, big, seeds, rind, red, watermelon. Awesome. You guys are excellent at this. So another way you could do it, well, first let's just reflect on that. What was that like? Did people find that fun, stressful, confusing? Feel free to unmute yourself or share in the chat. Engaging. What else? Anyone else want to share?
I felt competitive.
Competitive. Like you wanted to guess it first?
It kind of like gets your
Interesting.
mind
Thank
going
you.
before you say the next word, you know? It's exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, these are all great. So bringing in a little bit of play it just changes the way that you're thinking. It creates a shared experience that in and of itself, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit different ways that you can use play. But it creates a sense of we're doing something together, whether it's competitive or collaborative. You have to activate a different part of your brain than if you're just actively listening. But then there's all these elements of the game that can create different ways of communicating or learn different things about each other. So another twist that you can do in a culture setting to learn something about each other, if anybody is brave enough to try this, you can share something about yourself. So you can describe a hobby that you have or describe what your job is, and people have to guess it. And so not only are you practicing these different ways of communicating and active listening, but you're also learning something about each other. Would anybody like to try being the poet and maybe describe a hobby that you have? Any brave souls out there? Deidre, awesome.
All right, I just want to make sure I understand it. My clues can only be 1 syllable.
Yep.
That's going to be hard. Okay. Okay, I'm ready.
All right, go for it.
Peak. Trail. Boots. Yeah. Kristen's got it.
Excellent. Yeah, it's amazing how much you can convey with carefully selected words. Anybody else want to try before we move forward? Okay, we will move on. Thank you for that. And we'll reflect a little bit more on that experience in a bit. So why play? Some of the things that you just mentioned, it puts your mind in a different place. It gets you thinking creatively. There's great research out there that shows that bringing play into the workplace engages employees in different ways and really enhances their connectivity, their productivity, their motivation, their accountability to each other. There's a lot of research now about loneliness and people finding a sense of connection. And bringing play in is a great way to spark relationships outside of just the transactional or collaborative nature of working on projects and tasks, but a way to learn about each other, see what people have in common, and create those shared moments of joy and laughter, which it's crazy to me that that's still a controversial thing, whether joy and laughter belong in the workplace. But that's still not something everybody buys into. But there's really good research on the value of that. And so usually when people think of play, they just think of it in the context of fun and having that shared experience, but you can actually go a lot deeper. And that's what my work focuses on. We see play as the intersection of not just fun team bonding experiences, but also tapping into the experiential learning element of talent and organizational development. All learning at the end is trying to produce some type of behavior change. And people don't change their behavior just because somebody tells them to, or just because they read research about it. There has to be some type of emotional buy-in to the need for change and a way to practice it. And play is actually really great for both of those things. And then, as I mentioned before, the connection to mental health, as there's more of a focus on employee wellness and how work can positively, or at least maybe not negatively, impact people's lives. How do you keep them engaged? How do you make them feel like they belong and that their contributions are meaningful? That's so important. And so play, you can simultaneously have impact at these 3 different levels that all serve the purpose of leadership and culture. Another way to think about it, and this is one of the frameworks that my team and I use, is we're very visual people. So we have the iceberg, and there's 3 different levels of depth that you can accomplish with play by pairing it with experiential learning techniques. So the first is team bonding, and that's that fostering connection, learning about each other, having those shared moments, which are really important for team cohesion, creating a team identity, but also for starting to establish trust and psychological safety and keeping those connections going. And that, on the surface, it's fun, it's joyful, and that is valuable. But to go deeper, you add in a reflective component. And so what we call team building, that's when you are playing a game, but you're adding in a reflection about how did different people show up in that game? And what is it about that circumstance, whether it's the particular group of people or the particular activity that you're doing, that affects how we show up? And through reflecting on that, you can get it, well, some people are more competitive than others, and that affects how they show up in the game. That probably also shows up in their work together, what drives people on different types of activities. And so if you know that about somebody, I think, John, you mentioned that you were feeling competitive in that earlier game. It's probably helpful for the people who work with you to know in certain situations you get competitive. So in order to keep you motivated, maybe you want that element of competition, or maybe you don't. Some people really like that type of word guessing game. Some people find it really tedious and torturous. My husband is one of those. He will never play Scrabble with me, no matter how often I ask him to. And I respect that. So we have to find games that we both like, because that's not a fun way of thinking for him. That just seems tedious. It's not going to engage him. But knowing that is important to sort of avoid some of his triggers and to be able to make sure that the time we're spending together is happy for both of us. So that level of reflection as to what do individuals feel and think and act in the moment, and how do people's experiences compare, is really, really valuable for understanding the people that we work with. The deepest level is team development, and that's where you're trying to make some sort of culture change, process improvement. There's some organization development outcome that you're trying to work towards, and you're using play almost as a simulation to see what people need in real time. Maybe they can practice using a different communication strategy, or maybe practice applying different leadership skills, or give people a chance to be in leadership positions if they're not normally. So it's a way to test out the change that you're trying to implement and get people comfortable with it and reflecting on it. So it's all, you can do the exact same activities, but just pairing it with those insights. So I'll pause here for a second just to see if there are questions and if that makes sense before I move on. I get very excited about this and can go through it very quickly. So, all right, questions, thoughts? All right, now I'm going to keep going. Every game, every activity, there's some type of objective and something you have to do to accomplish that objective, some type of problem that you're solving. And so the mechanics within the game are really great analogies for what happens at work with diversity and different thinking and problem solving styles. And how do you balance that? And how do you help people understand the behavior of others different from our own? We all go through life informed by our own education, our experience, the environment that we grew up in. All of these different things contribute to how we see the world and why we think and feel the way that we do. And it's really easy to just assume that everybody else sees it exactly the same way that we do. And that is pretty much never the case. And so having that opportunity to say, oh yeah, I'm experiencing it this way. I think that the answer, the best strategy for this game is this. But there's all these other ways to look at it, and it's helpful, one, as a reminder of that, but also to learn from each other and be able to leverage other people's experience and knowledge in how you work together. Similar to how people approach planning and strategy and process, just understanding what people's needs are, what their tendencies are, what their strengths are. And then there's always that tension between balancing individual and shared goals. This happens at work all the time, where maybe the people in the finance office are constantly focusing on that bottom line, but the people who do customer service are focused on the greatest delivery, and the people who are in research are focusing on innovation. And yes, they're all working in the same company, but if they can't find a way to balance those, there's going to be a lot of conflict in between the departments, and the culture is not going to be that great because there's a sense of unhealthy sense of competition internally, battling for resources and battling over, priority. And these are just a few examples. There's dozens and dozens of different game mechanics that have very close parallels to workplace situations. And so it's about activating that experiential learning cycle where you have an experience and you reflect on it. Initially, just how did you feel? What happened in that situation? Let's tap into how we showed up and why. And then you're looking at greater aspects for, well, how else does this show up? What are the patterns in the behavior? How can this inform how we work together and help us do better or accomplish our goals? And then you can iterate on that. And so next time, okay, maybe the way I asked questions wasn't very helpful, but I saw what the impact was, and now I have ideas for how to do it better. And so next time I'll ask a question in a different way that's going to tap into a better engagement. And in this way, I like to think about, have people done, whether it's like the DISC assessment or Myers-Briggs or Clifton Strengths, any of those? There's all of these different sort of behavioral assessments, both individual and team. And it's great for getting an awareness of the different continuums of behavior and the different ways people think, but to actually apply that knowledge is a different step. And so if you think about, okay, well, I know that I'm more detail oriented, and pick on Paula because she's at the top corner of my screen, and Paula tends to be a more creative thinker. And so that shows up as conflict a lot at work. But now that we've had this conversation, now that I know, our assessments came out different ways, now let me try to see how I can work with Paula in a way that's is not going to cause conflict, is going to help us see eye to eye and be able to work together in a better way. So it's applying those insights in real time. Pause there before we go into another activity. Questions, thoughts? Oh, okay. And feel free to pop anything in the chat. Oh yeah, go ahead.
So Alex, I would just say too, I do some of this work too, and I will say that what I've noticed is it kind of goes beyond words. And so it evokes a whole other experience, right? And it's really cool. Like it's like playing as a child. You really kind of get into that moment of just being free of any boundaries around things too. I love that. Yep.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And there's so much, a lot of the sort of postmodern thoughts about work is that you want to detach the emotional pieces and not engage emotions at work, but that's not realistic. That's what makes us human. And that's what lets us collaborate and innovate in different ways. And so play is a way to bring that emotional element in a very purposeful way, and harness it
Yes.
for better outcomes. Yeah, that's a great point, Lisa. Okay, so we're going to do another activity now, and this one is called Visionary. And for this, you'll just need a paper and pen or pencil. It can be scrap paper, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. And in this activity, I am going to be describing an image that I can see on my screen, but you can't see, and you are drawing it only based on my instructions. And there's a timer, so there's a 2-minute timer, so it's a very, very constrained amount of time for you to execute my vision. And I want you to focus less on how your drawing looks, but more on what are you thinking and how are you feeling as you're listening to the instructions? What's helpful for you? What else would you want to know? Is this fun? Does it make you curious? Does it make you feel stressed? What's the experience like? Does that make sense? Okay. Start the timer and let me pull up the image that I'm describing. I should just rearrange things on my screen a little bit. Okay. So first, I'm going to spend a couple seconds and just give you like the big picture, and then I'm going to go into the details. So you don't have to worry about drawing quite yet. It's a sketch. There's no different colors. It's just a black ink on a page, and it's an owl. And just the owl from the neck up, and the owl is peeking its head out it's like looking from the left side of the page into the center. And so most of the page is taken up by the owl's head. It's a big round head that it doesn't have ears or anything, just like a big circle. And then the face is inside of the head, and the face is set apart by, it looks like a heart-shaped face, except the bottom of the heart is rounded instead of pointy. So if you want to draw a big rounded heart in the middle of that circle. And then inside of the face, it's very simple. It's just 2 round eyes and a beak that looks like the letter V. And so the eyes are maybe halfway in between the vertical space between the top of the heart and the bottom of the heart. And they're sort of wide set apart. And then the V is below the eyes and is pointing down. So you have the big round head and the heart-shaped face with the 2 eyes and the beak. And if you want, there is a little bit of the owl's neck that's a diagonal line from the bottom of the head going towards the bottom left corner of the page, but the face is the most important piece of it. I wouldn't worry about anything else in the owl. All right, and that was 2 minutes. It goes by very, very quickly. So before I show you the owl, how was that for you? What were you thinking? What were you feeling during those 2 minutes?
You needed to talk quicker.
I need to talk quicker? Yeah.
I just kept thinking I'm not an artist and I'm freaking out.
Maybe a little bit of stress there because of the skills.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, stress.
Yeah,
More
I kept
detail.
wanting to start over with
Yeah.
a new detail. I'd be like, oh no, it should be over here.
Yeah, it's really hard. In the first game we played, the poetry game, was just guessing a word, but this is actually creating something, implementing something based on the words. Oh, I saw perfectionism creeping in. Yeah. So this is a really simple exercise, but it taps into a lot of our own tendencies, our strengths, maybe some of our triggers. Oops. This is supposed to show here. Let me pull up the I'll pull up the drawing that you were doing. Do you see this now? See the owl? Okay. And so it's really these drawings aren't going anywhere. It's not about how perfect your owl looks. It's just about having this shared experience and seeing what does it bring up in you. And if we were a team that was working together, it would be helpful for me to know, if I'm the leader, how can I give instructions and set expectations in a way that's going to make sense to everybody? In a real tangible way, not in a sort of theoretical way. And so we could have a conversation about, was my pace okay? Were there certain details that I shared that you felt would have been, were not as important, or details, but things that I didn't say that would have been more important? So you can open up this massive window into insights of people's work styles and strengths and blind spots just through doing this shared activity. And then another layer, I wish we had more time, but is instead of having everybody draw individually, you put people into small teams and they have to collaborate. So you add that teamwork engagement, that teamwork element to it. And how do you balance different people's needs for pacing and expectations and strengths? How do you keep people involved when you have a different set of talents? And maybe not everybody is comfortable drawing, but there's somebody who's really good at taking notes of instructions and keeping a record of the information. So people have that. Maybe there's somebody who's really good at keeping people motivated and keeping the morale up. There's so many different strengths and assets that you can bring to collaborative work that we often don't think to tap into, because there's often just a focus on what's like the technical expertise that would be successful in this situation. And so it's a good way to bring some of those to light. So even in something as simple as this, as Visionary, which took 2 minutes of setup and 2 minutes to play, but you can spend hours reflecting. The team dynamics that come up are communication and coordination, expectations and instructions, different ways of processing information. Something that happens a lot is 2 minutes go by, and for some people, the screen will be totally blank. They won't have drawn anything because they need to have a full sense of what's expected before they can take an action. And that's an important thing to know. How some people, as soon as they hear draw an owl, they don't need to hear the specifics. They have an image of the owl in their head and they want to be creative. And that's what success means for them, is creating something that's fun and interesting. Listening and feedback and time management. So these are all different angles that if you're leading this game or when we're facilitating, we can target the experience and target the reflective questions to hone in on those and drive the types of outcomes that a team is looking to see to drive performance. So I'll pause there. Let's see, any questions or thoughts, or just giving you any ideas or insights? All right. So the next thing is, now we're going to hear from David about our work with Storm Bio over the last couple of years. And it started with the leadership team had been working with a consulting firm that was working with them on leadership development and building getting leaders to all be on the same page as the company was growing. David, jump in if I'm misstating anything, or just trying to provide a little bit of background. And I believe you had done the DISC assessment shortly before, and so had a sense of what people's styles were, but wanted to think about how do you put that into action. And so first we did a virtual workshop with the leadership team to start those conversations. And then we did a full team retreat, came into part of a retreat to do some different games to get people thinking about how they could better collaborate, how they could better understand each other. And with both of those, the eye was towards what are things, tapping into that self-awareness. What are things about you and what you need to succeed that would be helpful for your colleagues to know about you, to set you up for better working relationships going forward. So David, I don't know if you're ready to jump in and share some of the insights from our experience.
Yeah, very happy to. So again, hi everyone. I'm David Reiser, Chief Operating Officer at Storm Bio. We are over the course of the past few years, been between sort of a 10 and 15 person biotech company. And we've also evolved through a few different organizational structures and operating models. We were founded in 2020 and actually intended to start as a fully virtual organization before external conditions sort of necessitated that. But we built a company that was fully virtual, transitioned to a hybrid virtual model where we had full-time employees located both in the Boston area where we're headquartered, as well as in other US locations and the UK. As we've continued to evolve, we have our full-time team is pretty much exclusively in Boston, Cambridge now, but we do still work extensively with partners really all over the world. And the way we prefer to work with them is really treating them as though they are part of the team. In terms of just some additional context for our company and how we think about culture and how we value culture, maybe as one indicator, I'm Chief Operating Officer. I came on to join our founder and CEO pretty much from the very beginning. And without exaggeration, the first real meeting we had together was a conversation about the culture of the company that we wanted to build, what were the values of the company that we wanted to build, and how are we going to make sure that those values and those aspects of culture were strong and consistent as we were building this company that we knew was going to have this evolution through something that was fully virtual. So it's a very different set of challenges around building and maintaining and reinforcing culture than a fully in-person group and structure. So Alex and the VXP team have worked with us really in every stage of that company when we were pretty much fully virtual, had that hybrid virtual component, and then also when we were pretty much exclusively in person with the full-time team at least. And I'll say it was super helpful to have Alex and her team's experience around working within those different constraints and being able to design and facilitate activities that are suited for whatever the environment is, whether it be fully virtual, whether it be in person, and also sort of straddling those two things. Pardon me. And each time we went into an engagement, be it sort of a dedicated leadership team activity or something associated with a company retreat, there was always, a substantive conversation on the front end around what are the challenges that you're currently facing as a leadership team, as a company. What are the goals? Are there specific things that we'd like to focus on, that we'd like the team to be thinking about, that we'd like to facilitate, an opportunity for the team to think through and maybe experience in this sort of play-based way. And I think in a lot of ways, it's a question about what sorts of elements of company culture, of team collaboration, communication, interaction, do we want to accelerate? Because, as has been mentioned already, and I'm sure everybody probably agrees, there is a big difference in terms of like talking through something and sort of learning about different communication styles, talking about things that are important to you as an individual, how you work best, and then actually experiencing that in, a play-based environment, and being able to reflect on that and what that, how that felt, and how that might translate to a professional work setting. To speak to a couple more specific examples, I suppose. So Alex already mentioned this. Our leadership team, which again was a sort of hybrid virtual team, not all of us are located in the Boston area, but we spent a lot of time working together. And so one of the first things we chose to prioritize as a leadership team was to with a BXP partner, we had done the disc profile work, which was really insightful in terms of the variety of different but also very complementary communication styles we had across our 5-person leadership team. But I think the opportunity then to work with BXP, who had that information, right? We had shared sort of where everybody landed on those disc profiles, and they designed a series of activities that would allow us to explore that, sort of confront how we communicated differently, and observe in real time through this sort of play-based experience, how certain things, and again, coming back to this point about acceleration, I think we probably would have figured out a lot of these things about how we communicate, what works, what doesn't, what is someone's style, and how they intend to communicate something versus how it initially comes across. We probably would have figured that out eventually over several months and over many, strained and potentially confusing conversations, right? But this set of activities really allowed us, I think, to accelerate some of those insights and begin working together more efficiently, more effectively, more productively, much, much faster than if we were just sort of figuring it out on our own through trial and error. So that was, I think, a really impactful. The timing of that was really impactful for our leadership team's ability to work productively together. And then, as Alex mentioned, we've also done sort of full company retreat activities, which has, again, I think, really accelerated a collaborative and sort of mutually trusting working environment, which I would, I regularly say and firmly believe that one of the strengths of our team, especially the team that's working in the lab, every day sort of iterating on complex experiments and troubleshooting and slogging through some sometimes really challenging and energy consuming work. They work so well together. They're so collaborative, and it comes through, and I think is reinforced every time we've done these sort of play-based activities. I think the team derives a lot of value. The post-activity reflection has been really insightful, and I think something that, in many cases, sometimes it's the outcome of these, ostensibly silly games that we'll reference sort of months or even years later, fondly, because something about that experience really resonated and stuck with us, and as do the insights from those experiences. So, we've had a really positive experience with these types of activities. It's become sort of a default for us in terms of including this kind of activity in company retreats, especially because of the ability to customize, right? It's never the same. It's always, something is always different, right? Even if you're playing the same game, maybe the group of people is different, maybe the focus and intent is different, and the specific outcomes that you're going for can be different. So it's a different experience every time. I think different insights can be pulled each time, and it's a great way to sort of build a company event sort of around this type of activity. So it's been a really positive experience for us. If anyone has any specific questions about our experience or specific insights or things that we maybe didn't expect or anything like that, I'm happy to speak to that.
Yeah, thanks, David. One thing I want to pull out that you said is you can learn these things about people over time, but often you learn them when something doesn't go well and you have to sort of backtrack to resolve that conflict or that tension. And if if you did something that somebody else puts a negative value on, and might think, oh, they're trying to sabotage me on purpose, or they're withholding information, or they don't care about what I'm doing. We all default to those assumptions all of the time. And it's a lot more work to overcome from that. Obviously, working relationships can be restored. But within the context of a game or an activity, the stakes are so much lower to bring out some of those differences and some of those assumptions and to start to talk about them openly. So rather than go for months assuming that, somebody doesn't really understand what you do, or doesn't appreciate the skill that you bring, giving everybody a chance to voice what motivates them and why they think the way that they do early on is really helpful. And so if you think, I like to think about culture and healthy culture as removing different friction points, whether it's friction points that have emerged or potential friction points that emerged. And so you're creating these situations where different types of interactions are going to happen, but it's a very controlled, almost like a controlled experiment environment where you can tackle them head on and sort of avoid the conflict coming in later when the stakes are higher.
Yeah, fully agree. And, speaking from the perspective of, a small team, early stage biotech where there's everything to do all of the time, and time is the most precious and scarce resource, it can sometimes be challenging to prioritize this kind of thing, the communication work, something that feels like it can feel a little fluffy on the surface, but the opportunity to accelerate some of these paths to a more productive and efficient working relationship in the end can just save just an incalculable amount of time and heartache. So from our perspective, we think it's absolutely something that we have prioritized and continue to.
That's amazing. I was just thinking about like, how often the conflict rises in some of these games, or like the competitiveness, and how you resolve that in the moment. Like what, I'm just curious about that. Have you experienced that with teams quite often or in this play
Yeah,
environment?
that happens a lot. And that's the benefit of having, when you have an outside person who's facilitating the play, can point that out in a very objective way. And it's not about it's nice if everybody has a fun, great experience, but you often want some of that conflict to come out so that you can shine a light on it and talk about it. And so when I'm facilitating a session, I might say, hey, I don't know if you noticed, but when you asked this question, I think what you were intending was this, but maybe it was interpreted in a different way. Did you notice that? The people who are interpreting the question, what assumptions did you make? And so being able to call that out in the moment and just draw people's attention to decisions that they made that they might not even consciously have made. Something that happens a lot is you get a skeptic that's like, I don't want to participate, and they're just sort of sitting back like this the whole time. And you can gently point out, hey, what's the impact of your team to have somebody who is completely disengaged and is also bringing some negative energy and making people feel judged. And so just pointing out that you can't avoid having an impact on other people. Just the way we show up is going to have an impact on the situation. And so if people are more aware of things that they're doing that are negatively affecting other people, most people don't want that. Most people that gives them an emotional reason to look at what they're doing and change a little bit. Not everybody, but most people, like, you know what, I don't mean for this to end in conflict, or I don't mean for my responses to people's information to be really frustrating because I'm not giving them what they want. So it's a way of using that reflective component to sort of make those insights come from within, rather than me coming in and saying, you're being rude. The person sort of recognizes, oh yeah, based on other people's reaction, I'm not being the most productive team member I can be right now.
Yeah, just to add to that, completely agree. The benefit of having experienced facilitators like Alex there, and they've seen this a lot of times, right? And they've seen patterns, and they can point out something, ask some questions that push someone to be a little bit more introspective and examine sort of, why did I say it that way, or why did I interpret that this way? And again, coming back to the idea of acceleration, right? I think it was John, who was on the call earlier, mentioned the competitiveness. I may be one of those particularly competitive people as well. And in these situations where you have, say, that visionary game that we just played, and there are two teams on opposite sides of a room trying to draw the same thing at the same time and be the better, and do it better than the other team, and you have this time limit, right? It just heightens the stress and intensity. And then any of that competitiveness that, might, again, over a longer period of time in a professional setting, be harder to identify, or maybe a little bit more insidious almost. It becomes very evident very quickly in this low stakes, but higher intensity situation. And so you can sort of call those things out, have a conversation about it, and it be not something that people are feeling as personally or tying to their professional abilities or anything like that. So yeah, those conflicts are almost if it's almost good when those things happen in this environment, right? Because you can identify things, you can sort of address them at in this very low stakes environment. And also as a manager, right, there are things that you can pick up on about how your reports or other members of your management team work, that you can sort of file away and just remember when you are interacting with them in a regular workplace environment. That could be really helpful.
I just shared, I saw one of the questions in the chat. Yeah, Chris, and I'll come up to you in a second. I just shared a white paper that we pulled together a couple of months ago that has some of the research on the impact of play for employee engagement and experience. And we, one of the things we have is a whole database of different games and activities. So happy to share, but I'm going to put a link in the chat if you want to get a guide for how to you do that visionary game with your team and do the collaborative version. It's really easy to facilitate, and we share some pictures you can use and reflective questions. So if you click that link, it'll just ask you a couple of questions, and then it'll send you the instructions for how to bring that game in. Yeah, Christos.
So question for David, because I'm relating a little bit with you, because I'm also in a small group. Our company is like 35 people, and we also have a lot of scientists. So we have a lot of chemical engineers in our company. And I was wondering, when you first started with this, how did people react? I mean, were they open to that? Were they skeptical? How was it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, one thing I'll say is, I think cultural fits is among the highest, the most important things that we assess when we're bringing people into the company. So there may have been some, maybe unintentional or subconscious filtering here in the terms of the people who have joined the company, who we recruited into the company. I would say we have not had an issue with people being skeptical. However, I think a lot of that comes from leadership. And I think the leadership team, before we ever did anything with the company, and not to say that this is necessarily a requirement, but it is how the progression of things for us. Since the leadership team had already come together and done some of this work prior to then doing some of these activities with the whole company, I think we all appreciated the value of these activities and also the importance of really diving in and fully participating. And so I suspect that had a pretty significant impact on really allowing everybody else who might otherwise have been a little bit more shy and take some time to warm up. Having the leadership set the example, I think probably went a long way.
And one thing I'll say that if you think back to the iceberg where there's the different levels of play, if it's anything within the lower levels where you want that learning and reflection, the play is not done in isolation. It's part of a broader engagement, whether it's a retreat. So sometimes we don't even say yeah, we're coming in to facilitate games, but someone will approach us and say, we want to have a conversation about culture, or we need to break down some of the silos. And so we'll have a facilitator go in to do that. And the games are just one piece of it. And we also have some tools for measuring different elements of culture and how people experience their culture. And so you can then pick the right game that's going to bring out that conversation. I think a lot of the skepticism around play is because people have had those very awkward, forced fun, where somebody has an activity and it sort of comes out of nowhere and there's not any context given, and maybe it's not a good fit for that team. But that's our whole thing, is how do you use these different types of data, psychological data and team behavior and information about sort of game mechanics and engineering and game design to pick an activity that's going to enhance the right behaviors and outcomes that you're trying to work on.
Yeah, just really quickly to add to that, Christos, I imagine if you were to work with Alex and her team and said, I have a team of engineers, they're a little on the stiffer side, right? You know, like, how can we design a series of activities that's going to make sure that it's, you know, as quickly as possible, we're being as productive as we can with this time. And I'm sure they'd be able to help you pick the right things with that in mind.
Yeah, that helps a lot. Just like, I love what you both said about sort of understanding what you're trying to achieve in the audience and then sort of adapting the games towards that as part of an overall program. That makes perfect sense. Or retreat, for sure. Love that.
And also we say
Okay.
it up front because you want,
Yeah.
that's how you get people to buy in, to be like, this is something that you care about. This is something that you want to see, learn about. And that's why we're doing it.
Yes, yes. So thank you both for bringing this really great topic to the forefront. We'll be posting this both on the Conscious Capitalism Boston and Conscious Capitalism Inc. sites. So anyone who couldn't be here today, who registered, would be able to go. And anybody else has some interest in the topic. Would love to just close off with any other questions that anyone has before we end for today. Was this helpful, insightful? Thumbs up?
Really interesting.
Yeah. Good, great. Well, thank you for being here today. We really appreciate you coming, and feel free to learn more about Conscious Capitalism Boston and what the work that we're doing. Our next event is actually going to be in June in person. We're doing a CEO founders president event to really talk about purpose as a business strategy and how to actually take it into the workplace. So we'll be doing that in Norwood, Mass at an event space, and we're really looking forward to kind of pulling from the community and externally for this event. So again, Alex and David, thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it. And hopefully all of you have gotten some really great things out of this. And I'd encourage Alex, if you want to kind of talk a little bit about your business and how they can contact you, that would be great.
Yeah, I pasted my contact information and a website link in the chat. So please reach
Great.
out. Happy to share more.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, Alex. That was great.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Alex. That was great. I mean, I just wish everybody who registered would have showed up, but this is what happens, you know?
It happens all the time.
I know, it's so frustrating. You get all these registrants and then like, you know, although usually, you know, sometimes we get a lot more. It just depends, you know, it just depends upon what's going on. But this will be posted, so I'm hoping this will get you some traction. And I really, really love the work you're doing. And I really appreciate you connecting with us and David spending some time, because it helps to understand from the business side how they're doing it, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. And if you hear of any other chapters looking for speakers, I'd love doing this type of presentation. So.
Yeah, I will definitely, in fact, I have a meeting with a few tomorrow, I think, or Friday. So I'll mention it, because they always ask like what events are you doing, and we do share speakers at times, so it's good. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much. It's
Okay.
great to see both of you.
Yes, you too. You have a great rest of your week and